handing over to Chukwemeka, who's moderating. Um, then, yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are welcome to Leap Africa's Dissemination Wednesday, the first one for the year 2025. Thank you for joining us, and we are very pleased that some of you have joined us very early. Good afternoon. It's a warm afternoon here from Lagos, Nigeria. So kindly use the chat box. I think within a few minutes, we'd like to get to know our attendees and participants. Kindly use the chat box to introduce yourself, indicate your name, the name of your organization, the country or state that you're joining from, and your sector of expertise. So we'd like to do that within a few minutes so that we can get to meet our participants and perhaps we can have possible partners and collaborators in the room. So kindly use the chat box to introduce yourself, your name, the name of your organization, the country or city you are joining us from, as well as your sector of specialization or expertise. So kindly do that in the chat box. I will be looking out for your messages. Good afternoon, Abisoye. Thank you. Kindly introduce yourself. Yeah. So you're welcome to Leap Africa's Dissemination Wednesday. This is the first one for the year, and our topic for this afternoon is a very interesting one. And I'm sure we are all looking forward to the panel discussion. But in the meantime, kindly use the chat box to introduce yourself. You can share your name, the name of your organization, where you're joining us from, your country or your city, as well as your sector of specialization. Thank you very much as you join us. Yeah, thank you. So we'd like to do that for a few minutes. We have so many people that have joined early, which is very, very good. We are pleased to have you here this afternoon. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you as you join us. You're welcome. You're welcome. In case you are wondering, you are welcome to Leap Africa's Dissemination Wednesday and the first one for the year. So our topic for this webinar is Africa's Outlook on the Future of Social Entrepreneurship. So we have a panel discussion that awaits us. But before we get to the panel discussion, we briefly want to get to meet our participants, our attendees. We have many on the call, and kindly use the chat box to introduce yourself. You can indicate your name, the name of your organization, and your country where you are joining us from, as well as your sector of expertise, and perhaps the key takeaways or your key expectations from this webinar. You can kindly share in the chat box. Yeah. Thank you very much. As you do that, okay, good afternoon, Bita Mushema. Thank you for joining us from Tanzania. We are pleased to have you here. You are a non-profit working to improve the health of women. Thank you for joining us, and you work in the healthcare and higher education sector. It's a pleasure to have you here joining us this afternoon. Tahir Ibn Ladan, thank you for joining us from Nasarawa State here in Nigeria. You work with the Nasarawa Investment and Development Agency. We are very, very pleased to have you here this afternoon, and I'm sure there are people in the room that perhaps they'll be looking to connect with you as you introduce yourself. So kindly let us do that in the next few minutes. We have our panelists on the call, and they are very, very ready for us. We just want to get to know our attendees and participants this afternoon before we get to our panel discussion. Yeah, you are welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Once again, you can see on the screen, the title of our webinar is Africa's Outlook on the Future of Social Entrepreneurship, which is a very, very key topic and area of. Okay, thank you, Tahir Ibn Ladan. You are welcome. We have many people that joined us early, so we are going to begin the conversation very soon. But kindly use the chat box to introduce yourself. Tell us your name, the name of your organization, the country or city you are joining us from, and your sector of specialization. Perhaps within the room, you may have people that will be interested in collaborating with you and even getting to discuss with you further on your area of expertise. Yeah, thank you as you join us this afternoon. We have so many friends and community members in the room, and we are very, very pleased to have you here this afternoon. And we are looking forward to contributions from you and your take on the panel discussion today. Thank you very much, everyone. And we are very pleased to have you. Yeah, thank you. You are welcome. Okay. Yeah. So I'm still expecting to get more people to share in the chat box your name, the name of your organization, the country or state you're joining us from, as well as your area or sector of specialization. Thank you as you join us. Yeah, thank you. So you can also share your key expectations from this webinar. So what are the things you are expecting from the panel discussion that we've lined out for you this afternoon? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I think we've spent a few minutes to do that, and we'll still give just 1 or 2 minutes for other people that want to share their brief introduction, their name of organization, the country or city you are joining us from, as well as your area of expertise. Kindly do that in the next few minutes before we start our conversation and all the items we have lined up for you today. Kindly do that. Yeah. So if you have your friends and colleagues that will be interested in this discussion for today, you can kindly share the link with them. And we are also streaming live on YouTube. We are going to drop the link to our YouTube or page with you so that you can share with your colleagues and community members. They can also follow us on YouTube and get involved in the conversation. Yeah, thank you. So I think we have a large number of people on the call, and just to maybe get to meet some of the participants on the call, you can briefly share your name, the name of your organization, the country or city you are joining us from, as well as your area of expertise. Thank you, Alpha Dimaska. You are joining from Taraba State here in Nigeria. You are very, very welcome. Hi, Taraba, this afternoon. So you work with Association of the Deaf Community Service. Okay, you're an Association of the Deaf Community Service volunteer. We're very pleased to have you here join us this afternoon, and our panel discussion will start very, very soon. Thank you, Alpha Dimaska. I'm sure there are people in the room that perhaps want to connect with you beyond this this call today. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, all of you, for joining. Well, we have a very large number of people on the call, and we're very pleased, and so many people from our community and new people. So you're welcome for joining us this afternoon. All right. Okay. So I think let me just check. Yeah, we have our panelists as well as our key team members on the call, and we are going to commence the conversation very soon. So, but just to confirm, if we still have people in the room that would like to share uh, just brief introduction about themselves, their name, the name of the organization, and where you're joining us from, either Nigeria or other countries in Africa, and the state you're joining us from, as well as your area of expertise, and perhaps your key expectations from today's session. Kindly share in the chat box. Yeah. Thank you as you do that within the next few minutes as you anticipate our panel discussion. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mashudu Demana. You are joining us from South Africa, from Limpopo province. We are pleased to have you join us here this afternoon. You are a journalism graduate, a freelance writer and content producer. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I hope it's a pleasant day. It's a pleasant day there over there in South Africa. Thank you for joining us, and thank you. You're welcome once again. And if you're just joining us, we're just briefly having introductory moments, just sharing brief introduction about the participant. So you can also join in that using the chat box before we commence our conversation proper this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mashudu. Yeah. Okay. So I think we will proceed to all the key items we have for you this afternoon. Thank you, Bella Bassi, joining us from Akwa Ibom State and the founder of Beauty Brains Help Foundation. We are very, very pleased to have you here join us this afternoon, Bella. So without wasting, I wouldn't say wasting, we've not wasted any time. Thank you, Odinakachi Unwafo, go to inclusive of focus area. So you are joining us from Abia State here in Nigeria. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for sharing your introduction also. And I'm very sure there are people on the call that will be interested in knowing more about you beyond this call. So, yeah, as I was saying, without spending much time again on the introductory, thank you for all that shared. We are going to proceed to our agenda for the Dissemination Wednesday for this afternoon, which is our first Dissemination Wednesday webinar for 2025. And as I mentioned, the topic is a very interesting one. So, but to properly welcome you and give you the welcome that you truly deserve, I'll be inviting our Director of Programs, Amabel Unwakama, who is the Director of Programs at Leap Africa. She has her first degree in behavioral neurosciences from the Memorial University of Newfoundland and postgraduate degrees in quality management and global public health and policy from Memorial University. Amabel is passionate, she's a passionate servant leader, social change agent, coach, and sustainable development expert. She brings over 13 years of experience in social development and human services, designing, managing, and implementing youth and women/girl-centered programming with emphasis on strategy, empowerment, capacity building, and partnership development. She has worked across NGOs. She has worked across NGOs, government, as well as private agencies spanning continents. Throughout her career, she has been pivotal to the development and implementation of impactful programs and innovative strategies promoting social and economic empowerment, gender equity, and social inclusions. For many of us on the call, I think Amabel's profile, like we are testament to her profile, and I'm very, very pleased to have her join us to take the welcome address this afternoon. Participants, kindly join me as we welcome Amabel to take the welcome address. Amabel, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm not going to take much of your time. I know there's lots to talk about, and we don't always have the most amount of time to really dig deep into the topic. And the topic is a very rich one. And we're looking at Africa's outlook on future of social entrepreneurship. Very important topic. Why? Because, there's well, before I even start that, let me just say first, on behalf of the organization, Leap Africa, we want to say thank you to each and every one of you that's made time out of your busyness, your busy schedules. Thank you to our panelists who are here. Thank you for joining us from far and wide across the continent and even beyond. We're really, really grateful for your time, really, really grateful for your participation. Looking forward to the next hour of just engagement, learning, innovation, innovative ideas, perspective. The topic is very, very rich, very, very important because, as you know, Africa is one of those hotbeds right now when it comes to social entrepreneurship. So much is going on the continent. You have young change makers far and wide, young men, young women who are saying, I'm not just going to sit down and let things happen. I want to take initiative. I want to be proactive. I want to do something about the problems that we face, about the issues that I see in my community, in my continent, in my country. And because of that, you're seeing an increase in the amount of social enterprises that are being founded and started. And that is such a beautiful thing to see. But as you have these new and burgeoning enterprises and businesses and ideas, there's a need to keep the discourse up as to what that means for the future of Africa, for the future of social entrepreneurship. What are some of the trends that we're seeing? What are some of the new innovations? What are some of the ways we should be thinking? What are some of the drawbacks that we should be mindful of so that as we are having this critical mass of businesses, of founders, of startups, what can we avoid to prevent mistakes of the past? And how can we really move the needle on solving Africa's biggest, most wicked problems? And so this is a pivotal conversation that I think would be useful to everyone on the call. For those who are already founding something, who are thinking about founding, who are well underway with even interventions and their programs, this should be something that continues to inspire, but beyond just inspiring, it continues to help you do the best kind of work. So it's beyond just discussions and dialogues, but how do we take what we're hearing and learning and use it to inform the issues around policy for social enterprises in the continent, the issue around policy for enterprises in the continent, the issue around skills development. What kind of skills should we be thinking about? What are some of the constraints in funding, access to funding, finances, the different financial vehicles that exist? So we want to explore these emerging trends. We want to share potentially data-driven insights from our wonderful panelists and probably spotlight solutions, like practical, relevant solutions as well as ideas that people can leave here with just a new sense of what needs to be done and actually leave here feeling like they have the agency to do it. So beyond just us talking, you asking questions and you spending time here, I know that everyone that joined in here did it because of an expectation they have to learn. There's a hunger to learn more, to do more. And we want that hunger to be filled. We want you to leave here with a sense of, I've learned something new. I can actively implement, integrate these things that I've learned and start making an even bigger difference or a difference, whatever that might look like in your various spheres. So thank you once again for coming. Thank you for being with us. A special thank you to our panelists who are the ones going to really help us unpack this topic, which is a very interesting topic. And of course, looking forward to the Q&A, to the interactions, to the feedback from the participants. And I cannot leave without saying a big thank you to the organizers, my wonderful colleagues at Leap Africa. They have worked hard, they continue to work hard to make sure that these types of webinars and these things that we do actually are well thought out, well executed. So I really wanted to give a round of applause to them. They sometimes can be nameless on FaceTime with all the tech things at the back end. So thank you so much, dear colleagues. Really appreciate you all. And thank you once again to each and every one of you. Enjoy your next hour.
Well, thank you very much, Amabel, for that. Please, participants, kindly help me to appreciate Amabel in the chat box. Please use your favorite emoji and be generous. Kindly do that. Thank you very much. Ever supportive and amazing Amabel. That's our director of programs. Thank you for that warm welcome for our participants and our panelists and all the people on the call. We greatly appreciate that. So before we move ahead to our panel discussion, as Amabe has shared, just to walk you through the objectives of today's webinar. So the title is Africa's Outlook on the Future of Social Entrepreneurship. And as we all know, social entrepreneurship is increasingly being recognized, not just as a trend, but as a strategic pathway for sustainable development and inclusion in Africa. But despite the promise, there are several challenges that we are also aware of, which includes access to finance, which is a very big one. Also, weak policy support, as well as difficulty in scaling their solutions and also measuring impacts. So this is one of the ideas that informed this webinar. So the key objectives for today's webinar, there are four. The first one is to examine key trends shaping the future of social entrepreneurship in Africa. And the second is to explore policy frameworks, financing and sustainability challenges facing social enterprises in Africa. So importantly, the third is to showcase innovative models and enterprises across the continent, while the fourth one is to foster collaborative environments among social enterprises, donors, investor policymakers, and youth development actors in Africa. So I think you can say within this time frame, we'll be able to make each contribution towards achieving this objective, but not to take too much of your time. So I'll be inviting Chukwemeka Okeke, who is the Senior Programs Coordinator at Sleep Africa. They will be the one to moderate the panel discussions. Just a brief on Chukwemeka. At Leap Africa, we have 5 thematic areas. We call them the 3 E's, A and H. So the 3 E stand for entrepreneurship, education, employability, while the A stands for active citizenship, H stands for health and well-being. So Chukwemeka leads all our entrepreneurship initiatives. So he's a very, very good one to moderate this session, and we are very pleased. Over to you, Chukwemeka. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. It's a pleasure to be here. Please confirm that you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Thank you for joining
All right.
us.
Maybe that's why I'm CE, so you can see me.
Yeah.
Okay. Without taking extra minutes, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you very much, Akolade, for that very warm introduction. I'd also like to give special shout out and thank you to our Director of Programs for that very thoughtful, direct, and I would even want to say thought-provoking welcome address. Thank you so much, Amabel. It's a pleasure to be here. Okay, I think it's time to get to the meat of the matter. If we can get into introducing our very wonderful panelists. At Leap Africa, we believe in the value of resourcefulness and thought leadership, and we have, for this particular session of our Dissemination Wednesday that looks into Africa's outlook and the future of social entrepreneurship in Africa. We have the pleasure of having 2 amazing individuals whose wealth of experience cuts across private and public sector. I'd like to, in no particular order, introduce first our first panelist, Ifat Mahmoud. I hope I got that correctly. Ifat Mahmoud. She's the regional representative for Africa at Innovision Consulting, a friend of the house. Just a bit on her bio. Ifat Mahmoud is an experienced development professional with over 10 years experience and expertise in market systems, supply chains, and gender integration. As a regional representative for Innovation Global in Africa, Ifat spearheads business development, project implementation, and building teams across West Africa, having successfully launched the firm's operation in Nigeria. With a strong background in market resilience and inclusive economic growth, she has led major national surveys and climate finance projects across different countries, from Nigeria to Mozambique, even to Zambia, and her past roles include co-founding Nigeria's fastest growing delivery solution, Oya Now, really exciting, and working with international organizations like Mercy Corps and Palladium Group. It's important to note that Ifat holds a master's in development studies from the International Institute of Social Studies, ISS, Erasmus University, and a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Dakar. It's a pleasure to have you here, Mahmoud. Ifat, I don't want to rush to the other side.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. And we also have the pleasure of an amazing individual from the public sector, the economic advisor to the Katsina state government, Khalil Nuru Khalil. Mr. Khalil specializes in building globally competitive subnational economies with increased private sector participation. He currently serves as the economic advisor to the Katsina state government in Nigeria. Just to mention that that's where our past President Muhammadu Buhari is from. So we basically will be gleaning from a very deep wealth of knowledge. By March 2021, Khalil became the youngest director of a public institution in Nigeria, amazing, and later appointed as executive secretary at Kadipa at the age of 28. In his 1-year tenure, he succeeded and exceeded expectations by attracting over $1 billion in investments, more than doubling the agency's annual target. And as Director of Investment Intelligence and later CEO, introduced strategic technological-driven innovations for data, research, and investment engagement. And beyond his public service, Khalil is passionate about complex systems, heterodox economics, and the transformative potential of digital assets in global finance. Wow. That is to tell every single person on this call the world of experience that we have seated on the panel today. You're very welcome, Mr. Khalil.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think it's a great time to dive into the conversation. So just to mention again that the topic we're looking at today is Africa's outlook on the future of social entrepreneurship. We can almost agree that this is no longer a buzzword, social entrepreneurship. And with the welcome address that Amabel had given, we had seen that there are emerging, already existing social entrepreneurs and innovators across the length and breadth of Africa, seeking to solve Africa's challenges. But it's important to understand what the future of social entrepreneurship is in Africa. So I'm just going to direct the first question to Ifat, if I may. So from your regional vantage point at Innovation Consulting representing Africa, what key trends do you see shaping the evolution of social entrepreneurship in Africa? What key trends would you see that is shaping the evolution of social entrepreneurship across Africa?
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here, to be talking about something that is extremely important and also interesting in terms of innovation. Sorry about my voice. So once again, I'm Ifat Mahmoud. I'm a regional representative for Innovation Consulting. Innovation is a market-based approach consulting firm. So we work with innovations, and this is very much a topic that is close to our heart. I've been working in Asia for the last 15 years, last 6 to 7 years, which is a context I'm providing to be able to tell you why I do have some insights into the key trends. But before I go into that, I think it's important to understand what is social entrepreneurship. So if you see how it all started, it was first charity, right? Just basically addressing some direct social and economic hardships. Then it became individual-based, where you had a few people who were recognized for the efforts they were making in terms of bringing some changes. And then it started becoming more of an organizational and ecosystem approach, where we are now looking at businesses which are self-sustainable, because we all know that donor funds, eventually run out. We are looking at businesses that are sustainable and they can solve social and economic problems. Remember, a business only is profitable and scales when you're solving a real problem. Therefore, social entrepreneurship is actually the most basic models we can all agree with, because it solves a problem. And we, of course, know that in the global south, there are many socioeconomic problems to solve. And also, it sustains itself in a manner that you do not depend on donor funds, be it internally or externally. So that's what social entrepreneurship is all about. Now, if you look at the major trends, you'll see that number one, I would say localization of innovation has really happened. What does that mean? That means that instead of having solutions from the global north that are being applied to the global south, we are now looking at more innovations happening within the countries by the people of the country, right? So, for example, there is this company called Mshule. I don't know if everybody is aware of it, but it's in Kenya. It was developed by some Kenyan entrepreneurs who came up with an idea of building learning content via SMS. And why is that? Because, of course, smartphone and internet penetration is not as high as the global north, right? Therefore, they came up with this entirely hyper-local innovation for a hyper-local context, where they're providing learning content by SMS. So that's an example of how localization is happening quite a bit, which is excellent. I think that's where sustainability comes in. That's where understanding of the context comes in, and that's where ownership comes in. The second one I would say is it's youth-driven, right? And that's partly because majority of the population in these countries are youth. I mean, Nigeria has 70% of the population under 30. So you can imagine what a buzzing young population we are here. And at the same time, there has been a lot of efforts by the government, the private sector, as well as donor agencies to promote capacity to the youth, who are the future, right? And if majority of the youth drive social entrepreneurship, you can imagine how many of our socioeconomic problems will be solved, right? So I think that's definitely another trend we've seen. For example, there is this company called TISAS in Nigeria, who are also working on edutech. They have created localized educational content with all the indigenous languages, right, available to lower income families. So you're now kind of breaking the barrier to education with these kind of local solutions. Another one I would say is that we are looking at a lot of hybrid business models where we are not separating NGOs versus businesses entirely, which is where the whole social entrepreneurship aspect comes in. And we are looking at a lot more blended finance models where maybe in the beginning it's there's a lot of grant provided. There's a lot of support provided in terms of acceleration, capacity building, and then they are allowed to go on to more, let's say, profit-driven investors, right? Which is something that is quite interesting to watch. And I think last but not the least, we know that for the last few years, there's been a lot of a drive towards climate. So we are looking at a lot of green enterprises, organizations, small, medium, and large, looking at solar, looking at waste management, a lot of creative industries looking at how to, for example, turn tires, recycle tires into different products, and also replacing plastic, looking at how to sustainably and profitably look at waste management. So I think these are the 4 major trends that I've seen in the region in the last few years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ifat. And it is important to mention some of the poignant points that you've made. One around circular economy and circular and green economy. Also to mention that it is absolutely tied to your first point around how the solutions are becoming as localized, even more localized as possible, away from just trying to copy and paste what we have in the global north down towards the global south. But I'm just going to hold that thought and also try to get a sense of how Mr. Khalil probably views it from a policy standpoint. So my next question will go to Mr. Khalil to say, in terms of being in the public sector and then having that, in a sense, private sector lens, right? Because I'm just looking at your bio, I'm just curious to know, right? How would you view the role of social enterprises, just like if I had mentioned, how would you view the role that they play in advancing inclusive economic growth in Nigeria and also in Africa specifically? So in context, the roles that social enterprises play, just like if I had mentioned, now taking it to a more public service lens, how would you view their role in advancing inclusive development, specifically in Nigeria and then at a global or at a more advanced regional state, Africa? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Could you please confirm if you can hear me loud and clear?
Perfect.
All right, great. So basically, the way we see it is this. I'm at a state level. At a state level, we don't really have more or less to do with fiscal and monetary policy. But Nigeria is big enough for every single state to act as if it's a country on its own. I'm in a state called Katsina. This is the second subnational I'm serving in. Both Kaduna and Katsina that I served in both have a population of upwards of 10 million people. Now, the way we see, I'm not an expert in social entrepreneurship. Let me make that clear. I'm not like Ifat and you guys. What I will say, though, is that I do recognize the importance of social entrepreneurship in terms of solving a lot of economic problems that we have. My role as an economic advisor and previously as head of an investment promotion agency is to solve for what's known as market failure in economics. Market failure, of course, is the inefficient distribution of goods and services in any subnational economy. What that entails, of course, is, how do we allocate these resources efficiently and equitably? When I came across social entrepreneurship, it was through a company called Tomato Juice. I'm sure a lot of you know about Mira Meta.
Yes, I do.
Mira came, she was just this single lady from America, Harvard Business School, and so on. And she came to invest in Kaduna State. And we thought, okay, what do you want to do? She wants to add value, tomato processing and the likes. She came in, we gave her the land, we did all we needed to do. Mira has now successfully impacted upwards of 10,000 farmers. She has increased their yield. She has done an amazing job. I think she's one of the biggest success stories that I probably could tell, maybe in Northern Nigeria and Nigeria as a whole. What that entails is social entrepreneurship lies between the social service sector, what we're trying to do with regards to increasing well-being with healthcare, education, and all these things we're trying to do, and then the economic sector. Now, these two sectors are separate. Why? Because on the one hand, you want your social services to be affordable, you want large coverage, and so on for the citizens. And then on the other hand, you have this profit motive, private sector driven, government enabled sector where you have companies coming in trying to make a profit, do their business, employ, hire people, and so on. But the cross-cutting nature or this, the middle ground between these two sectors is where the social entrepreneurship component comes in. Now, it's very important because when I discovered this whole people, planet, profit, concept, that was where we saw the likes of Mirameta coming in. And eventually we did a lot of policies across around that with the likes of GIZ. We did what's known as the inclusive business policy. I think we're the first in Nigeria, I think second in Africa also to pilot this program. I think recently when I left Kaduna, they passed it into, I think it's a policy now or something like that. When I came to Kazan, I replicated same by doing what's known as an inclusive economy policy. What this entails, of course, is how do we carry along all the citizens? When we talk about inclusive economic growth, we're not just talking about carrying women along, carrying PWDs, persons with disabilities, and so on, and communities where these investments are located. Because we did the research, we saw that people were being employed, but we wanted to ask, are their lives being impacted in a positive way? Are these guys getting the right income levels? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? What exactly is happening? So this is where the social entrepreneurship inclusive business concept came about. And I think, so far so good. If every single state in Nigeria adopts this, implements it, monitors it, it will go a long way in solving a lot of the economic problems that we have going forward. So I'd say social entrepreneurship, very important, solves all our market failure problems that we're trying to, embark on, and the like. So I think I'll delve into more technical, details of the policies and further questions that you'll be asking. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Kali. I think that was very insightful, very insightful. And I would like to almost say applaudable because working with two subnational governments that alone can stand as governments on their own, and then being able to replicate the level of success that you have, leveraging the power, the partnership for or with social entrepreneurs or social enterprises is applaudable, right? It's testament to the fact that social enterprises, like you said, is at that nexus between the private sector and what the public sector is trying to achieve at the same time. Really, really insightful. So I'm going to go over now to Ifat. In your opening statement, you had mentioned how different blended finance models are coming in because of the different models that social enterprises are taking now. We already are conversant with the challenges with financing for social enterprises in the grand scheme of things since the beginning of the year, the turn of last year. So my question then would be, are there innovative finance models that are unlocking wealth, access to finance for social enterprises in Africa at the moment? Okay. Okay. Just a moment, guys. So as we wait for Ifat a bit, it'd be great if we can put in the chat box. If you have questions so far, you can absolutely just begin to put them down. So we will get to the point where we're asking the necessary questions. I already have one or two questions off of the first thoughts that Ifat and Mr. Khalil have shared so far. So please keep those questions just handy. We will create time for that because this is the essence, this is the meat of why we're here today. Okay. Or it's okay if I come back to you, if I just quickly get to Mr. Khalid. That's fine. Okay, perfect. Okay. So Mr. Khalid, I'd like to firstly say fantastic job done so far with the Kaduna and the Katsina state government. With the level of policies that have occurred within both states, there are just a few questions, right? If you mentioned if more subnational governments can work within this policy ambit and effect certain changes, Nigeria would definitely be the better for it. Just not thinking about it just from a social enterprise lens. So my question then would be, what gaps have you observed in the current policy frameworks, maybe at the subnational governments that you worked in or others that you're aware of? What gaps have you observed with the current policy framework for supporting social entrepreneurs with the governments that you've worked in or other governments that you're aware of, the current gaps that exist in the policy framework? It'd be great to just learn of them.
Yeah, I think first of all, there isn't even any policy framework for social entrepreneurs in most states in Nigeria. That's to begin with. The concept of policy design, the concept of policy implementation, monitoring, and the likes is still very alien to most of governance in Nigeria. I'll give you an example. I think, most of the things that are logical and easy to do are the hardest things to do in governance in Nigeria, funny enough. So let me give you this. You have your land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship as your factors of production. What you should do is create policies that guide these factors of production across every single subnational in Nigeria, right? If we do that, that is how, if let's say a state government, sits down and says, you know what, we're going to be an agrarian state, then you have to create policies that will shape these 4 factors of production towards you, being an agrarian state and the likes. Now, once you do that, this is how you begin to, craft certain types of policies across priority sectors that you have chosen. It wouldn't just be agriculture. Of course, you'd have supporting sectors like ICT. Realize they can act as if they're also countries with regards to actually making the right policies and not just relying on the federal government driving every single economic agenda is very key. Once you do that, you then cascade down these economic reforms into your local governments, because there are a lot of issues that local governments can solve that the state government doesn't necessarily have to solve. And there are a lot of problems that state governments have to solve that the federal government doesn't necessarily have to solve. This is what this whole decentralization and, people have been talking about in politics and the like. So once everybody realizes that every single tier of government has a certain type of responsibility, has certain types of policies they can enact and laws, institutional reforms, and so on, then you begin to talk about mindset. The mindset is also key. What exactly is social entrepreneurship that you have to even create policies for it? What is it solving? Nigerians, I don't think we have reached that level just yet. So we have mindset issues. That's one gap. Another gap, of course, is capacity issues. And this could be institutional, it could be operational, it could be, various other things. What I mean by this is if you do the policy, somebody needs to own the policy. So it has to be an institution. What is this institution? What is the law of this institution? If you pass that law, create the new institution, what kind of capacity do they have to also drive this policy, to drive that mandate that has been created for them by law? Do they hire the right people? Do these right people also have the right mindset to implement it, and so on? When you have all of these things down, because you cannot do more than the capacity of your civil service in a state government. You can have the most brilliant governor, you have the most brilliant public servants, but if your civil service is not up to the task, you cannot deliver public goods to the citizens. So once they understand all of this within the context of what we're talking about, then there needs to be this vision that everybody is driven towards. This is where social entrepreneurship comes in. So if I'm working at an investment promotion agency in any state in Nigeria, I know where these guys come in. I know what problems they're trying to solve. I know when I'm doing policy advocacy and listening to them, I know what kind of policies we need to enact and what I need to tell my governor back. And then we need to make sure we monitor and evaluate what exactly they're doing, if the lives of people are actually getting better or not, and so on. So those are the kinds of gaps that I see that are issues for us in Nigeria.
Wow, wow, this is really like a lot to unpack, sincerely. I was almost taken aback when you said, firstly, are we talking about the policy frameworks even exist in themselves, right? Let alone looking at where the gaps exist. But it's exciting to see that you were also able to lead us further in the conversations to help just unlock a few things. So I hear institutional gaps, right? I also hear gaps around capacity as well, and one important one that you did mention, where we come in as even as enterprise support organizations, or CSOs, or CBOs as they like to call them, would be creating that, beyond just the vision, creating the awareness for what social entrepreneurship is, for what the work that social enterprises do. And I can just speak directly to the fact to say that various programs that we have at Leap Africa, like the Social Innovators Program, is a clear example of how we're pushing the narrative for what social entrepreneurship is and what social enterprises do. And maybe what we can do with this conversation just on this particular point would be to take it offline to say, how do we currently work with state subnational governments to keep the word alive, so that governments beyond, even before the policy, are aware of exactly the role of social enterprises, and then we can co-create a vision, like you mentioned, where everybody's working towards that vision: the private sector, the enterprise support organizations like Leap Africa, and even the social enterprises themselves, right? So to achieve a lot of the success that we're looking to get. So Mr. Kali, also on this point, right? So we can just maybe close out on this particular area. You also mentioned the role of government in creating enabling environments, right? Maybe a question. I know you did also mention the partnership with Mira, right? Are there other incentives or partnerships or procurement support that youth enterprise or social enterprises, within your knowledge of them, the ones that you work with, are there the ones that are there procurement first? Are there partnership incentives that governments can provide support for these organizations? So we know that they exist. We might not have heard so much about what they've done, but what are some partnership incentives or procurement incentives, or maybe even policy incentives, that your government can provide to social enterprises to help them scale from the grassroots?
I think this network went off, so he's joining
Hello,
again.
I'm back. I'm back.
Great.
Welcome, sir.
Apologies, please. Apologies. So I think I heard the question a bit: incentives, the likes, and what we're doing, right, with regards to social entrepreneurship. So I spoke about the inclusive business policy, very important, because if you have social entrepreneurs coming in and you want to also incentivize traditional businesses to become social entrepreneurs and social enterprises, you need policy guidance. The inclusive business policy, to me, was an incentive towards saying, look, once we identified these inclusive businesses, that was one. We had like criteria listings and so on. It was a very in-depth study. Anyone can read it online. It was a landscape survey that we did for Nigeria. Once you identify them, the next thing was the accreditation scheme. The accreditation scheme meant that if you are identified as an inclusive business, meaning you went to a community, you invested in a community, you employed people, and their average incomes actually increased over time above inflation, right? And their lives got better. And we interviewed them and they said, yes, this company came in and right now I can afford school fees, I can do this, my life has materially become better. Then we entered into an accreditation program where now you're certified as an inclusive business in Kaduna or Katsina State. And then now what that entails is you're able to access various incentives with regards to business retention and expansion programs. So if you say you need more hectares of land for you to, sorry guys, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Sorry, apologies. So once you get that, then you're able to now access various incentives. So if you say you need 20 hectares more to plant XYZ, whatever in your business, you're going to automatically get it. You're going to get waivers from your building permits. You're going to get waivers in your C of O premiums and so on. So that was meant to be the accreditation scheme to incentivize the social entrepreneurship, guys, and also social enterprises to do even better. And then I think there was a time in 2020 when we were working with Impact Foundation, something, to do the National Advisory Board for Impact Investments. I think that was trying to solve the issue of financial capital, impact investment capital at the federal level. I was part of the policy working group that did that. We're trying to answer a few questions with regards to incentives, incentivizing finance capital, and so on. I don't know what happened to that program. I think there was a change of government, and the usual Nigerian stuff happened. But then with regards to procurement, if you have a public-private partnership, maybe law or whatever, the likes of Nasara, I've seen people from Nasara here. With regards to your infrastructure procurement, there are things that you need to put with regards to the environment, you need to solve. Stuff like climate resilience and environmental sustainability toolkit, so that when you are doing this procurement, you are very much, aware of climate resilient issues and so on. There are things like climate smart agricultural policies. We're embarking on one now in Katsina. We're doing it with a pilot project so that the pilot project informs the policy, and we're not just doing it off the top of our heads. You do that. You also, let me check. There was one policy we worked on. I forgot the name of it. Yes, your financial inclusion drive as well is very key. Financial inclusion is very key because it solves a lot of problems, right? With regards to finance, solving poverty in rural communities, and so on and so forth. I think these are the key things you need to focus on as a state government. With regards to incentives, also your ease of doing business drive in the state is also very key. How easy is it to do business in your state with regards to the time, cost, and procedure it is for businesses to set up? Those are kinds of like the very fundamental things that you need to do across key benchmarks, like obtaining your CFOs, obtaining your building permits, contractual, disputes across, various businesses, obtaining your environmental impact assessment, and so on and so forth. And then continue to incentivize, businesses coming into your state via waivers. Let's say if we want to attract only social enterprises in a certain type of sector, we can give land for free if the employment levels are going to be substantial. We can give waivers across various payments that you need to do, and so on and so forth. So, and then also feedback, always making sure you're talking to the private sector and the business community for policy advocacy, and making sure these things are right is also very key. So these are the things I think are key. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Khalil. I can almost say there's a playbook here that we need to really, really take a look at. Other governments within the Nigerian, even I dare say the African space, needs to take a cue from this playbook. It's important to see evidence-based accreditation, and then social enterprises can even then get incentive support, right? And I also hear the need for a whole very holistic, if you were to put it that way, a holistic approach to support in terms of policy, whether it is procurement, environmental, agriculture, whatever the sector is. There's a holistic approach that is built not just on policy top of head, but there are pilot projects that we can use to pick up from that. Really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Mr. Khalil. So I'm just going to quickly head back now to Ifat. I can see that you're back. Great. It's great to have you back. Okay. It's interesting to see that Mr. Khalil mentioned something about even finance as well, access to finance. But the access to finance now is based not of just rolling out impact investment finance across social enterprises. It is backed by proper accreditation, right? So I would want to say, what are blended or diversified or recent finance models that social enterprises can harness to push growth within the work that they do?
Great. No, well, first of all, congratulations, Mr. Khalil. This is really good news. Even I didn't know about all the policies that are coming across. And I think before I go into the financing model, again, it's a context, there's a lot of information gap, right? So we need to have more and more of these organizations and social entrepreneurs aware of what's possible. So one of the things in blended finance, and we've been talking about blended finance for a long time, right? I've been seeing that there's a lot of gap even in our knowledge, and there's a gap in the knowledge of the investees. There's not a lot of information about what's possible, what's going on, right? That needs to happen. And so now coming back to what is, again, blended finance. For the for the benefit of the entire audience here. Blended finance is a very simple concept of putting different types of financing together, right? So that we are not rejecting a good idea or a good product simply because it does not fit my financing model at the moment. So if I am a venture capitalist, for example, I would be looking at putting in a lot of investment in the beginning. And my hope would be that in 10 years' time, it gives me 10 times or 50 times my investment. If I am a private equity investor, I would want a dividend and I would want this company to keep going on and I would keep wanting to have some profits from it. If I am a catalytic funding, I don't want any profit from it in the beginning and I want to help grow the business because I know it's going to solve a problem. I like the founders. I think it can work and the policy environment mostly would be favorable. So what blended finance is assessing a company. Let's say, for example, what Khalil was saying earlier, that you have an accreditation where you're saying, yes, I am a social entrepreneur, or my enterprise is social enterprise. We do solve problems, we have an impact. And therefore, I possibly bring in a catalytic investor in the beginning who says, okay, I cannot expect any fund or profit back from the initial investment, but I will put down, let's say, a $30,000 grant funding or a catalytic funding to help you with ABC. These things are happening, right? So there's a lot happening in the continent, I would say East and West Africa mainly. I'll give you an example. For example, again in Kenya, Kapu. Kapu is a social commerce platform, and they've been able to raise revenue-based financing from different entities, right? So even from commercial entities, where the revenue-based financing is a very simple concept, where you basically have, you get financing based on how much revenue you're generating. So it's a milestone-based financing. So it's very simple, it's very transparent. You know, it also motivates the company to be able to generate revenue and not be a startup who spends a lot of money instead of investing, right? So that happens. Then if you look at Impact Investor Foundation that Khalil was talking about, they have something called Deal Source, right? Deal Source Africa. So there's a Deal Source Nigeria, there's a Deal Source Ghana as well. So they have been putting together different investees and different kinds of donors, so impact investors, VCs, etc. And they've been able to do a good form of blended financing. Thrive Agric, I know, for example, has done the model of crowdfunding, right? So if you are at a loss where you're thinking, is my idea even good? You know, I have accreditation, so how do I generate the funds? I don't know how to talk to a commercial bank. You know, the terms are saying I'm not sure how it goes. Then maybe you can just do a crowdfunding because your idea is good. You actually impact people. So there are a lot of people out there who would want to fund, and they might not even want to return at the moment, right? So crowdfunding actually has worked. You can approach different platforms for that. GoFundMe is one of them. And we've seen the likes of Thrive Agric taking advantage of it in the beginning. And one more very interesting one that I've seen taking more mileage now is ethical financing. So ethical financing actually has a very balanced model of blended finance already, right? But because we don't know much about it, or maybe because sometimes there's a lack of acceptability, because it's also related to Islamic financing, the acceptance was very low. But more and more, there are organizations like 117 Capri, for example. They are very ready to share the risk with you. They're ready to share the profit and the loss with you. It's not interest-based. There's a lot of engagement in your business, right? So that's why it's called ethical financing. So that's actually one model that I'm seeing more and more relevant for organizations like social enterprises, which are not too small, but not too big either. I'll stop there. I think.
Wow,
Yeah.
this is a lot to take in so much. Really exciting to just hear about the different models. And something very important that you mentioned is the fact that not any one of them has a more direct benefit over the other. It depends now on what the social enterprise is looking to achieve and the vision as well, even as well as the sector or the trajectory of growth within that sector as well. Wow, really exciting. This this alone is a conversation separate that we're going to have around the diversified funding models, honestly. So I'm not going to dwell on it. But it was something that you did mention around communication gaps from the beginning. I'm sure that a lot of social enterprises are now aware of these policies that Mr. Kali had mentioned. And then now the conversation is, how do we even track, monitor, and evaluation, right, for these social enterprises, that they can even access certain level of finance and also get certain level of information that helps their social enterprises grow. So the big question is the role of M&E. Where does it come in? How does it help bridge the gap, whether it's communication or financing? Would you like to share?
Sure. And I think one of the brilliant things that Khalil has mentioned is the accreditation process. So I remember when I was working on the donor end, right? Felt really bad for the organizations we were working for, because the amount of reporting and amount of data we wanted, it was just, that's just not their job. That's not their business. So, but luckily enough, I'm seeing that, for example, with these accreditation processes or even certification processes, there's some data that you already require. So one aspect is, okay, let's go through these processes more, right? So they're widely accepted. So for example, if somebody has that certificate, you already know that there's some data they have, there's some level of due diligence that has happened already. So there is a barrier you've crossed as an enterprise, right? That's number one. Number two is, I think it's actually as ecosystem players, our responsibility and to work with the FIs, right? So whoever they are, whether they're VCs or commercial banks, to work with them to have unified standards. There are some measurement standards, but to have very simplified tools, because even when you go to the banks, right? I mean, we work in climate finance quite a bit. Even when you go to them, sometimes they'll be like, look, I really need to understand even what is green. How do I even know this is green? It's a lot. It takes 5-10 years to get them up to speed. And I don't blame them, because it's just so many, jargons and so many tools. So one thing is to make sure there are standard tools, right? Which is something Innovation is working on already. And second is also to be aware that you can do a lot with data that is being generated by the user. Right, so that's something that has been happening quite a bit. So I'll give you an example of this Kenyan firm, a Ugandan and Kenyan founder. It's called Ruazi. So what Ruazi does is Ruazi collects data from consumers. So if you are, let's say, buying a Coca-Cola, if you're buying a medicine, you're buying rice, right? Ruazi is able to collect data from you as a user and incentivizes you for it, which means that now you're not spending time and resources and sending people to the field and then getting data, right? So of course there is value to doing that, which is what we do in terms of impact monitoring. There's a lot of value to do that, because there's a lot of analysis you can do. There's a lot of one-on-one conversations you can have in communities and understand whether the product is actually useful. But at the same time, we have to make data collection and monitoring cheaper and faster. And that is happening, but I would still say it's not happening at the scale we can. So for example, I would directly now propose to Khalil that let's work on these tools and let's work on a monitoring system which is easy and scalable, right? So that all the social entrepreneurs on this table at the moment would be asked to send in questionnaire filled with 10 pieces of data, and we would already be able to tell them where they stand and what else they can do to communicate their impact.
Oh, wow. I already see partnership brewing in the works, right? Very, very interesting. But I hear two things, actually. There is a need for social enterprises to, if you want to gain traction with the work that you're doing, knowing that this balances profit and impact, there's a need to go for the information. There is a need to also engage with both the private side of things and also the public side of things to find out what information are relevant for the work that I do. And then I also hear, which is always a difficult battle for the guys in the monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning space, to say, how do we make M&E as less cumbersome or less expensive as possible, so that this information quickly reaches the people who need them, right, and they're able to do the work that needs to be done. Very, very important. Thank you so much, Ifat. You can all agree with me that the panelists have done a fantastic job so far. I'm going to let them go soon, but I just have one, two questions that are really, really burning on my mind. But I'm going to take this one now to Mr. Khalil, right? We know that the government, first off, the private sector says that, oh, they want profit as quickly as possible, just thinking about the different funding models. Now, the government is looking to get the government's major role of responsibilities, providing social benefits for the people, based off of tax and all of the other things that are paid for. And I dare say that in your role as economic advisor, the government is faced with a lot of priorities. How do you balance the direction of policy or the direction of government action to say that this is one socially impactful enterprise that we can push, right, knowing that the profit might not come in as quickly as possible? So the question would be, with government priorities packed everywhere, how do you come to that balance to say this is one area that I'm gonna this government policy or this government drive will look at in terms of social enterprise? Just to confirm that, Mr. Khalil, you got that, sir?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying or what you're asking.
Okay.
So what essentially we do really is take a look at when you want to kickstart an economy, right? Like when we first came to Katsina, there's virtually nothing there. So the first task is who risks capital first, right? We say we want a private sector led, government enabled economy, but really the government has to invest in certain key areas, right? I'll give you the chicken and egg problem. They will say, oh, we cannot invest because there's no power. But then the power guys will be like, we cannot invest because there are no industries. So in between, who takes that risk? It's definitely the state government. So what we now do is essentially, like I told you guys, we're trying to build a globally competitive subnational economy. We have identified certain key priority sectors. So once you do that, that then gives you a guide towards what you want to do. So let's say we want to do a special agro-industrial processing zone. We have identified land, then we go and invest in the power plant. If the power plant returns profit in the next 10, 20 years, we don't have enough patient, private sector investors to do so, the state government takes that risk. Sorry, can you confirm you're listening to me? I feel like it's laggy. Okay, good to go. Good to go. I can see.
Perfect. Good to go. Perfect.
Right. Okay, sorry. So we do that. I'll give you another example. We just launched at the Iowa Tech Fest that held a few days back. We launched our startup law. In that startup law, we have a fund, and this fund is going to invest in people, enterprises that the private sector wouldn't have otherwise thought of it more as a profitable enterprise or endeavor, right? Maybe it's just seed capital for some people, just to take some risk, see what they can do. Really, it's more R&D type capital and patient capital than it is profit making. So I see the state government coming in these key sectors where you're just trying to kickstart certain activities in certain economies. It could be the creative economy, it could be the technology economy, it could be agriculture, whatever it is. So we balance it out based on policies, based on the laws that we pass. We put it in very key strategic areas so that once this capital is deployed, or in our PPPs, once this capital is deployed, and it takes a long time for this money to come back, so on. If we take that risk and this actually succeeds, then we've done our part. It's kind of like what the US government did back in the days with the likes of DARPA to fund, the internet, GPS, everything we have today. That could not have been done without patient capital. That could not have been done without government intervention. It's the same thing with that I see for social entrepreneurship. It's kind of like a weird analogy that I'm making, but I see it that way as well. If you want to help people, you want to help the planet, and profit is not coming in the way we want it aggressively to come in, then that's why the state government can come in and do strategic investments here and there to ensure that this patient capital, bears fruit. And also some impact investors also share the same idea or ideology with the state government, in the sense that they act both as a foundation and some sort of, fund that actually returns money. But then I'm sure they look more like an SROI or whatever. So your social return on investment and so on, which I would like to take IFAD up on, and she mentioned that we need to work together with regards to data. I think we also need to work on the, how do we actually measure the impact of all these social enterprises that we bring in? So I'll take her up on that. We'll engage, inshallah, and see what we can do. But I think the metrics that need to come out on how we actually measure these things is key. And data is very important, like she mentioned. It's the most mind-blowing thing that we don't invest in our subnational governments. That is the only thing that will take us to where we need to be, that we don't focus on. It's like I said, the most logical thing to do in Nigeria is always the hardest thing to do. And I'm pretty sure in other African countries as well. But that's how I see this thing going. Thank you.
True. Right to point. Thank you, Mr. Khalil. And I think that government is, as much as we might not want to hear it, the government is beginning to understand its role, away from policy to actually putting the feet in the water, right? Testing the waters first, and then showing that they can actually lead by example. The private sector might not want to quickly get in there because the profit, or the, like you mentioned, return on investment is not immediate, but the government can lead the way and say, okay, we can come in, do a PPP and see how that works. And then data basically drives all of those conversations. Thank you so much. So final questions over to you. In fact, maybe in closing would just be one word. What is that one thing you would say to a social enterprise now, and say, focus on this one thing, and it changes the dynamics for sustainability for you? And then we can also have the same to Mr. Khalid. One thing to a social enterprise that changes the dynamics for sustainability for them.
Try to make money. If you're solving a problem, you will be able to generate value and people will pay for it, which means you will be able to sustain and grow. If you keep thinking of grants, if you keep thinking of catalytic funding, then you do have a problem to start with. So don't bank on them. Start making money.
Really, really punchy. I felt like that hit below the belt, but I need that to be said. Over to you, Mr. Khalil. What is from a policy lens?
I think from a policy lens, we'll be a little bit more political than IFAD. We'll say just strive to just create value. So I write off of what she's saying. If you create value, money will come. You help the planet, you help people as well, and it will solve everyone's problem. Really. Value creation is key.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Khalil, and thank you so much, Ms. Ifat. It's really been a fantastic time having this conversation. And what better way to just close out and get into the point of questions by saying, create value and place a premium or place the price on that value. So make money while you're creating the value and making impact within the communities and solving subnational or national problems, even regional problems as it were. All right. Thank you so much. Can we please, in the chat box, by virtual round of applause, please celebrate our panelists. They've done absolutely fantastic. More than even address the questions, I already see a consortium forming. I would love to be in the middle of that, because one thing I've heard is when you're supporting the two parties who are trying to make money, you're making money in the middle. So it's important to to also know that this conversation has also bettered newer partnerships and newer relationships that can yield bigger values, both for ESOs and even for government and the private sector. So if you've got questions, we can put them in the chat box, or Abdullah, can you confirm if you can take questions off of mute, or we can have them?
Yeah, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So if you've got questions, we can put your hands up virtually, and then my colleagues will just indicate and let me know. I already see one question from Mashudu Demana. Sorry if I got that terribly wrong. Mashudu. It says, okay, when I read the question, Ifat or Mr. Khalid can absolutely take it. In the event where you are dealing, say, using state youth funding with a corrupt government, wow. I think this question is, we already know who's going to take it. In the event where you're dealing or using state government funding with a corrupt government, how can a youth-based organization operate without the known unethical interference the state has on the business, especially as a youth-owned idea? Skalil, over to you. Now, the challenge is the organization is doing fantastic work, but there's interference from the government. What can this individual do?
Wow. I don't know what I have to be doing. I think, sadly, it's one of those realities we unfortunately have to live with. If you're dealing with the government, if it's the federal government, then, I'd advise, you look for other sources of funding. It could be global, it could be subnational, or even at the federal, but someone else. If you cannot do that, if you're at a state level and, the funding is corrupt, then move to another state where it is less corrupt. The issue really is do more research, try and find out ways where you can get financing. The world is global now. There's really, this is not 1978 or 1968. Information is abound, and you guys can try and look for alternatives wherever you can find them. Stop relying on one source. Don't rely on solely government funding. There's so many other private sector solutions, so many other, civil society solutions, and so on, and even, private equity, venture capital funds, and so on and so forth. But, you can get in touch with me if you need further advice with which state government you should avoid in terms of corruption and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I know this is a very dicey situation, especially with regards to, for some social enterprises, it's like, oh, this funding just came and we just have to work with it, right? But it's a question now of your ethical value as an organization versus just solely in your hands, right? And you've absolutely put it in perfect light, very perfect light. So I see a hand up. Thank you, Mr. Khalil. Okay, I think just to confirm, right? Mashidu agrees that you've answered the question. So I saw two hands up, just to confirm. Salaha Kuchi, if you do not mind, you can come off mute and ask your question. Salaha, are you there? Okay, perfect. I see you're muted now. If you're speaking, I can't actually hear you, so well, you can try to put it in the chat box if that's possible, or we can come back to you if we still got some time. All right. Ikechukwu Solomon Obiora, I see your hands raised. Can you come off mute as well to ask a question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Please go for it.
Okay. So my question is to Mr. Khalid, actually.
Okay.
So as a new trying to do something, coming up newly, you understand? So how do you go about let's say convincing or probably gaining the interest of like the state government to buy what you're proposing? Because it's something if you have experience and you have the work done already, but then coming up as new and then you believe that okay you can do this. How do you go about gaining the government like approval or interest in your particular proposal? If it's something that can be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Kechiko. Mr. Kali, did you get a question?
Like, how do you get the state government or the government to be interested in like maybe a proposal you have or something like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, very, very easy one answer. Look, every government, right? There's this fallacy of composition of saying all politicians are bad, all governments are bad and inept, all this, all that, all that. But within the system, there are always people that are actually trying to help, trying to reach out, trying to get ideas, trying to work with young people and so on. I'd like to believe I'm one of them. So it's just for you to identify those like-minded individuals. And like I mentioned, for example, for me, I know we have a wide network of young, talented people in public service that are willing to always help or, give a lending hand. So even if you don't know who they are, you can reach out to people like me that are serious, that I can now link you with whoever I feel is serious in an organization or subnational government. But they do exist. partner with them, and just try and reach out as much as possible. And we do our best to reply, to people like you. So try and reach out to me in any platform that you feel, is palatable for you. I will do the needful for you, inshallah. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Khalil. Ikechukwu, does that answer your question? Now you have a link to get that value that you're looking to partner with across. Okay. All right. Salaha says that you actually joined. I have a project I'm working on for my community on business development. I want to partner with Leap Africa. Okay. We will share our email address, so you can just put together the proposal just as a deck, and then you can by all means just share with us via email. We'll take a look at it and then we can engage. I hope that resolves that, Salaha. And then there's a question, just a final question to Ifat. Someone had asked, it says you're a bit fast with the different financing models. If there's a way you can just mention a few, maybe just highlight the financing models that you mentioned initially when we're talking about diversified or blended finance models.
Okay, sure. I think a simple way of thinking about it would be whether an activity or business where it is at the moment can generate money, revenue and profit. Right? If it cannot, let's say, for example, this person who just said she's working on a community development program, right? Maybe there needs to be a lot of community awareness. Community awareness requires door-to-door engagement. Maybe you want to do a lot of marketing in social media. That requires some funding. This funding, will be an expense. You cannot get that money back immediately, right? Now, for that kind of activity within your enterprise, will require some catalytic or grant funding. So that's one type, which does not need to be returned. However, it needs to have an impact. It needs to be able to reach and communicate a certain message, for example. Let's say you've done that, and now you're at a stage where a product that you have worked on, and that product might be, let's say, sanitary napkins for young girls in remote areas. So you know that this product, in order to be sustainable, has to be sold at an affordable rate. And now you're looking at marketing and distribution for that product, right? That is an investment somebody can make because they can see a revenue model. Now, because you're still a small company, an investor can come in and say, I'm going to give you some catalytic funding. So we are going to see whether you now start making some money in the beginning. If you do, then I'm going to, once you make some revenue, I'm going to fund you again. So it's a revenue-based financing, but it's an investment model. It's not no more a grant. And then once you grow bigger, you might have other investors who say, I don't even want to know what you're doing. I can see you're making money. So I want to be an equity investor in your company. So blended finance models are very simple, based on your need as a company and the returns that company can have at that moment. What is the model you can have? Right? So you can always go online and also have a look at it, but think about it in that sense.
Wow, thank you so much, Ifat. And then you've taken a step further to provide even context, even with examples. But I think that's really helps. That really helps. All right, I think we've come to the point on today's Dissemination Wednesday webinar series, where we'll do the first thank yous, our absolute thank yous to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, Ifat Mahmood and Khalil Nur Khalil, for your time. Thank you for your wealth of knowledge. Thank you for your experience. And I dare say that this is the one of many conversations that we're going to have. Thank you for sharing with us. Looking forward to more exciting conversations and pushing the narrative for social entrepreneurship and the future of Africa. Thank you again. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Over to you now, Kaladi. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chukwemeka. Thank you for that powerful and wonderful moderation. Once again, thank you, Ifat and Khalil. It's been a very brilliant panel discussion, and my note here is full. I've been taking notes during the session, and I'm sure all our participants were also taking important points from the panel sessions. Thank you so much, Chukwemeka, for the wonderful moderation and for the instant reflection on the points that were shared. We are very grateful to have this interesting conversation today, and thank you, everyone. So before we call it a day, we just want to share some few opportunities within Leap Africa that are currently ongoing that our participants can also take opportunity to benefit from. So we have these are our first dissemination Wednesday for the year. So we are going to have two additional ones that are going to come up. So the second one will be coming up in next month in June, and the topic is unlocking decent work for African youth. Kindly watch out for the creative so that you can register when the promotions are out. So it also promised to be a very important and interesting conversation that speaks to unlocking decent work for African youth. So the third one will be evaluating or leveraging evaluation evidence for effective policy and programming. So that will be coming up in September. Please watch out for that dissemination Wednesday. Also, we'll be looking forward to having you join us. So currently, we are making preparation for a training for the advanced monitoring evaluation research and learning training. So this training, the promotion is currently ongoing, and there's opportunity to have 50% or 100% scholarship. So for those that are interested in further developing their capacity in terms of monitoring and evaluation, and which is very, very important, our panelists, they make reference to the challenges that social enterprises face in measuring and also documenting their impact. So we can take use of this opportunity to register for this training. There's opportunity to get 50% or 100% scholarship for this training. So you can follow the training link to register and submit your interest. So I think those are the opportunities we want to share with you. Please, can you kindly go to, okay. So before we call it a day, we have a feedback form. We would like to get your feedback on today's session. I know that it has been a very brilliant one, but as a learning organization, we also want to get your feedback on what we could have done better and perhaps like things that actually went well that you want us to continue to do. Kindly follow this link to share your feedback. It's a very short survey just to share your feedback on what we can do better and what actually went well that you want us to continue to do. So I think that's the final one. If you join, and many people have indicated that they joined the webinar late. If you join the webinar, or you even want to make reference to this session beyond this call, so we are going to share the YouTube link with you. So you can watch this webinar on YouTube. We are live on YouTube, so you can always go back to it and watch this webinar and also reflect on some of the insight that have been shared. So I think that's an opportunity for you. So we'll be dropping that in the chat box, the link to the YouTube. Okay, thank you. Abdullahi has dropped that. Thank you. So you can always watch and share with your colleagues and your community members. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Please kindly use this link to complete the feedback. We'll be looking forward to getting your feedback on what went well and what we could do better, and perhaps like ideas that we can also use to develop another webinar for our community and the development ecosystem and landscape in Africa. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we are grateful to have you today. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I could say a number of us are interested in volunteering with Leap Africa. Kindly visit our website if you want to learn more about Leap Africa, about our programmatic areas. As I mentioned earlier, we have 5 thematic areas. We have programs that covers education, entrepreneurship, employability, active citizenship, and health and well-being. So we have different interventions that covers this area. So we also have different units. Currently, this is being hosted by the Monitoring, Evaluation, Research and Learning Unit. We also have the Policy, Advocacy and Government Relationship Unit. So we have also the Communications Unit, and they have different initiatives under our respective unit. So you can visit our website to learn more on our programs, as well as how you can volunteer with Leap Africa. So I see that a number of us are interested in that. So kindly visit our website. And also to make reference to the session, you can watch us on YouTube. Yeah, thank you, everyone.